Everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm here today with Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is the director of the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Disease and is the nation's top infectious disease expert who's involved in leading our response against the coronavirus. So, Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for joining today. And I was hoping that we could just get started. Maybe you could tell us about where we are with the situation overall. Where are we with the spread of this and the overall government response?
Well, we are certainly still in the escalation phase of this outbreak, Mark. As you know, globally, different countries are at different phases of the outbreak. China got hit very early on, which was the origin of where the virus first came out in Wuhan. Are we okay? Yeah. Yeah, the virus first came out on Wuhan, and then it seeded different countries. We had a seeding of it here, and the first cases were travel-related cases. And then what you might expect to happen, which has happened in multiple countries throughout the world, that you have then secondary and tertiary cases. So right now, we've gone from a handful of cases just, a few months ago until right now, where we have, close to 10,000 cases, over 150 deaths. Worldwide, there are close to, if not already reached, about 200,000 cases and close to around 10,000 deaths. The epicenter of this has shifted from China, which dominated the infection numbers, the morbidity, the mortality early on, so that they've now come down in their peak to the point that there are relatively few new cases in China. And the epicenter has now shifted to Europe, particularly countries like Italy and France and others. So it is truly a pandemic. It's in 150 plus countries throughout the world. It's in every state in the United States, and we are still every day we get more and more cases, and we'll continue to get more and more cases. But the response to that, which we can get into a little bit, is going to mitigate how bad this is going to get and how much the peak is going to be.
Yeah, so before we get into that, maybe you could just talk for a minute about what are the projections that you're currently seeing? What do people expect in the United States, in Western Europe, in the countries where there are currently outbreaks that are growing very quickly? What can people expect in terms of how this will affect their communities, how this will grow, how this will affect them?
Well, first, let's see what the virus is going to do, and then you could kind of extrapolate that into what the impact would be in a country. If the virus is left to its own devices, you will see a major, major peak, which will then turn around and come on down. In China, even with their major, rather draconian efforts to contain it, they got off, I wouldn't say to a bad start, but it was a start where they were not expecting it. And it took them about 2.5 months to get to the point now where there are very few cases in China. Europe, particularly Italy, is right now in the phase that they're still accelerating. So they've had a few weeks of an acceleration. They've not been able to contain it. So the same thing likely will happen somewhere around 8 weeks or so until it goes down enough that you could feel you're almost out of the woods. We now are still in the escalation phase. How high that gets, Mark, and how long it's going to take to turn around is going to be very much dependent upon how successfully we do containment and mitigation, the kinds of physical separations of people that have now been part of the guidelines. It's rather disruptive of society, certainly is. It's inconvenient, but it's that kind of thing that's going to determine. So right now, if we do well and we're really successful, at a minimum, it's going to be several weeks.